Well, if you've got an important message you want to share, I highly recommend picking a guy who's wearing a fur coat in the desert eating bugs. He will definitely get people's attention. I think sometimes we forget about that. This is the desert. He's wearing camel hair, like a fur coat. And he's a little crazy by most people's standard, right? And he goes right at them, doesn't he? You blood suckers. But it's not that he really had any hatred for them. And he didn't mind that they were coming to him. What he minded was the inconsistency around the fruit that they bear, or bore. Whether they bore fruit at all. That was his challenge to them. That's always what it's going to come back to. Like, what are you guys doing? You're here. Are you here just out of a curiosity? How do you expect to be changed? And so he calls them out on it. I imagine it was a little uncomfortable, a little embarrassing. These are the religious leaders. And they hear great things about this thing. I mean, just move it into modern time. That it, if someone, we use this example a lot. But you take St. Teresa of Calcutta. She's doing this great work, and imagine a bunch of priests and bishops just going to see the work she's doing, and that she turns and comes at them strong. Well, indeed, many of our prophetic voices of today do come at religious leaders strong, because that's sort of the complication of being in leadership, isn't it? Trying to bring everybody along. I get it. But the challenge is for each and every one of us. This is that sort of paradox of what it is of our faith life. When I speak of the 5 truths of life, one of them is your life's not about you. Your life's not about you, and the sooner you and I start living that truth, the happier we'll be. But while it's not about us, it's also completely about what we're doing with what God's trying to do with us, that he can uniquely only do in us. So there it is. We're waiting. We're waiting, we're waiting, we're waiting. When I was at the Lingap Center, there was a staff meeting that I had to present at. And I've worked in the Philippines long enough to know that an 8:30 staff meeting may or may not start anywhere in the same hour. And so I said to the director, with no judgment, I don't mind that happens. It was true when I studied in Israel. It's true in many countries. People, like, well, that's Filipino time, that's Jewish time, insert their thing. I don't mind. In fact, they find funny that the Western world is just so bound up in time. It starts at 8, it better start at 8. Anyway, I said to the director of the Lingap Center, I said, is this 8:30 or Filipino 8:30? And she said, Filipino 8:30. So that's great. It doesn't matter to me. There's a couple things I'm going to do if it's not actually starting at 8:30. Yeah, no, it started at like 10 to 9, which is fine. But you look at what I'm going to ask you to do in the rest of Advent is weight training. WAIT, weight training. To be thinking about what it is that God wants to do with us. And waiting is hard for us, not just because we're impatient, but certainly first and foremost because we are impatient. But I think secondarily, it's hard for us because we don't believe that God's actually working in our life. Right? We don't, on some level, believe that. And that's what makes waiting hard. We may see God's work in bigger ways or in grander plans or maybe in our neighbor's life, but sometimes it's hard for us to believe or see the fruit of what God's doing in our life. There's part of the problem of the waiting. So I just think there's 3 things that we want to think about in terms of the waiting, sort of 3 categorical ideas. And the first has to do with paying attention, active waiting, if you will. As a communicator, we speak of active listening, right? That you kind of, you said this, let me kind of say that back to you to make sure that we're actually talking about the same things. Well, how about active waiting? And what active waiting does is looks around in the space of waiting to say, what's happening right now? Because in the waiting, I guess I would say it this way, what God does to us while we're waiting is at least as important, if not more important, than what we're waiting for. What God can do to us and in us and through us while we're waiting is at least as important and possibly more important than what we're waiting for. But not if we're going to let ourselves be distracted and angry or whatever, or just frustrated. But can we actively wait? What's God showing me right now in this waiting? I mean, I gave the kids a silly example, right? But my knee-jerk reaction is, leave that bag. But wait, what if it's mine? Oh, well, then we should stay here all day until we find it. Oh, I see. But when we actively wait, then we're connecting ourselves to everybody, which I think plays well into the second one, which is God expects us to wait in community. Jesus waited in community the night before he died. That's why he brings everybody along. He's in one sense just waiting for that whole awful event to begin. And does he do it alone? No. Sadly, they fell asleep on him, but nonetheless, he brought them together in community. Mary waits with Elizabeth. Simeon and Anna wait together. God's people always wait together. And we're together today, not just to receive some spiritual goodies and then go about our way, but to think about what it is God is asking of us as individuals, as a community. You know, as a community of John the 23rd, as a community within our bigger municipal communities in our state, in our country, in our world, all of those concentric circles as they spin out. What's God asking of me, of us? And then the third is that we be grounded in hope. That this Eucharist that we receive, that this gospel that we just heard, grounds us in hope to know what we're waiting for is worth it. And what we're waiting for is our salvation. And to remember, Jesus has already come, is coming right now, and will come again, right? It's just this ongoing truth and reality that's happening. But that requires practice, doesn't it? It truly is weight training. Because so much in our culture is just instantaneous and immediate resolution. There is a great value in delayed gratification. There is a great value in waiting maybe just a bit longer to understand another person. Rather than as they start speaking going, I got it, and I already know what I want to say to you about that. You see how that's consumeristic? If we don't wait, if we don't honestly listen to each other, if we don't spend that time, we'll never produce good fruit. We can't. We're already sure that we have all of the answers. And what Jesus is offering here in his life and witness and what John the Baptist is setting up as this whole thing comes into motion is the value of pausing and letting the prophet disturb the comfortable, right? That's the classic definition of a prophet. They comfort the disturbed, they disturb the comfortable. And maybe today you're in one camp or the other or a little bit of each. But that's what John's doing to the religious leaders here. He's disturbing the comfortable. Hey, you bloodsuckers. Think about the fruit that you're bearing. And so hear him saying to us, hey, can you wait? Can you actively wait? Can you wait together? And can you stay grounded in hope? Because anything less is us just taking back control of the whole thing and trying to run it and control it and worry about it. And it's just nothing that we were ever designed to do. And quite frankly, to the extent we've tried to do that, it doesn't generally end well. And so I go back to that sort of tension between the two things. That it isn't about us. And yet, it's only what God can do in us that matters as individuals. Say, Lord, let it happen to me. As Mary said, right? Let it be done unto me. What are you trying to show me as we're waiting in this moment? There are many things in our church, in our country, in our culture, in our world that most of us have a strong opinion on that needs to be resolved one way or another. But it would seem to be, in God's way, in God's plan, the first thing that we have to do is wait. If God's whole salvation plan was just about getting the message that we end up with, this is a very inefficient way to do it. Amen? That you're going to let this child be born. You think of all the mess that has to happen. The woman has to agree to this. The child has to be born. He has to survive to a certain age to do this ministry and hope that anyone hears it, listens to it, all that. None of this makes any sense from an efficiency standpoint. None of it. And so that can't be the message, efficiency. The message has to be something else. To be patient, to wait, to let it unfold, to let it be done unto me. That to me is the huge challenge, because I am both made in the image and likeness of God, and I can co-create with God. I can be very powerful. We can all be very powerful in the ways in which we co-create with God. But that same power can be used to deconstruct, to disintegrate the community. And so the tension sits right there. And that's why this season, to me, is always so important. It isn't just prep time for the magic of Christmas. This is something far deeper that really is training. And so I love that image. This is weight training. And as I've given many homilies before, I am as impatient as anyone. And when it starts to rear up in me, it's that moment in just gentleness to go, there it is. Here is the difficult work of being a disciple of Jesus, of being a cousin of John the Baptist, if you want to think about the ways in which I can actively wait. I can be a person that waits with the community, and that means then I've got to share what I'm worried about, what I'm anxious about. I've got to risk it. I've got to be vulnerable. What if I don't want to do that? Oh, the guy we worship is super vulnerable. And I better be grounded in hope, in His Word, in His real presence in this Eucharist, so that when we go out there, it isn't perfect, but it is absolutely faithful to the very thing that He asks of us. Let's gently and humbly accept that challenge to be people that can wait. Because what we're waiting for is indeed the coming of our salvation. Not in an efficient way, in a very messy and slowly unfolding way. And it will gracefully and gently be laid at our feet again. Just like every invitation that God gives us. Here, accept this challenge. May we have the courage to wait. May we have the courage to accept the challenge today. May God be praised.